What's up, my friends? We've got an acid wash jacket. Does that mean we also need like a pop collar? We've reached the point of social distancing that we start to lose our mind. So a few weeks ago when we talked about how I decided I was going to start making videos again because there's, a pandemic, we didn't really talk about how I was feeling or dealing with everything going on right now. I kind of jokingly mentioned OCD, but I thought it might be worthwhile to talk about my actual OCD diagnosis and how it's affected who I am and what that means for how I'm dealing with the state of the world right now. So buckle up for some mental health story time. When I was 11, I remember my entire family getting a super awful stomach bug, and I was the last one to catch it. And just the abject terror of waking up in the middle of the night feeling totally fine, but suddenly vomiting my guts out, and my mom coming in the bathroom and being like, "Oh honey," because she knew the kind of awful ride I was in for. After this honestly pretty traumatic experience, I was terrified of ever throwing up again. And so the logic in my brain went like this. Throwing up is caused by illness. Illness is caused by germs. Avoid germs at all costs, and therefore avoid traumatic illness ever again. There's some truth to that. Washing your hands, avoiding sick people, etc. are ways to help reduce your exposure to germs and illness. But you can't never get sick again. That's a pretty impossible task. But combine my hereditary tendency for perfectionism and a trauma response, and what do you get? An obsessive compulsive disorder. I started doing some stereotypical OCD things, with the most prevalent being that I was obsessively washing my hands to the point of the skin being chapped and cracking. But my obsession with germs permeated my entire life. Like, there was no such thing as the 5-second rule for me, and a guy learned that I would not eat any food that had been touched or I even thought had been touched. So that's how I ended up being bullied out of my lunch as a middle schooler. Yay. And it really just snowballed from there to the point of having panic attacks if I'd even heard that someone had thrown up or been sick recently. It translated into an obsession with making perfect grades. Basically any way I could exert some semblance of control over my life and then having a complete meltdown if I couldn't. This came to a head for the first time when I was in 6th grade, and my mom took me to a doctor who then sent me to a psychiatrist who then recommended either medication or therapy. My mom didn't feel like medication should be the first choice, especially since I was only 11 and I couldn't make a decision for myself. So I did therapy for about a year. It helped. I learned some useful and healthy coping tools, and the panic attacks and obsessive germ thoughts lessened. But there was still an intense need for perfection and that kind of germ fear hiding under the surface. And it can rear back up at any time. It did, especially during my senior years in both high school and college, and in various times in my 20s, just generally during high stress times of my life. And when something like this pandemic happens, and now everyone is recommending the kinds of cleaning and hygiene requirements that I have been obsessing over my entire life, all those kind of intrusive and obsessive thoughts just start bubbling back up like a once dormant volcano. That's why the weeks leading up to and then the week or so after it being declared a national emergency, aka the general population starting to take it seriously, were so fraught for me. A lot of that irrational panic of everything being infected came back full force. And on the one hand, it's being recommended that we do live like that right now. And I get that because most people don't live like that. And so changing to that line of thinking will help more people be careful. But it is very difficult for someone like me who has always thought like that and has to actively convince myself that some things are okay. Basically, I'm constantly risk assessing. Like, is it okay to eat this cookie if I haven't just washed my hands? Or is it okay to drink after my boyfriend, parent, friend, etc. if I'm thirsty and there are no other options? Being OCD, for me at least, is like taking a normal person's thoughts and even fears and apprehensions and dialing them up into overdrive. You can't think about anything else and you can't function normally because of these constant thoughts and fear and risk assessing on stuff that most people just, it doesn't even register. Unfortunately, in a way, everyone's kind of living that life right now, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I think it does speak to why once I was able to start working from home and not really go out at all, my stress level dropped significantly. I was back in an environment I could more easily control. I do worry a little about the long-term implications of this for me. Like, will I have agoraphobic responses when I'm able to, go back out into the world and, potentially resume a normal, whatever normal will be, life? I don't know. I'm trying to be conscientious of that and how I am thinking and treating myself right now, but there are a lot of unknowns for all of us, not just my OCD self. So yeah, that is my little OCD history. I don't think I've actually ever talked about it on the channel before. It's funny because talking about anxiety and depression has become relatively innocuous for me at this point. It's like, oh yeah, Caitlin, the depressed girl. But being diagnosed as OCD as a child, a preteen, really was such a deep source of embarrassment for me, and it just disrupted my life so fully. I kind of lost all my friends around the same time, so I associated that loss of friendship and connection with being OCD. Like, I was the mental health leper of my 6th grade class. So it's not a thing I'm very open about, but what better time to talk about it than when we're all kind of dealing with some obsessive germ-fearing thoughts. Remember, you guys can also connect with me and Finn over on Instagram, and as always, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know the moment there's a new video. And I'll see you guys next Thursday. Bye!